Hey everyone, it's Jeff Shoemaker, broker owner of RE/MAX Agility. We are back today with step 7 in our home buying process. Today's step is going to cover really most of the activities that you're going to go through in preparing for your closing. Some of these things are items that get missed, and that at the end of the day when you're trying to close, you'll find out that they either haven't been done or you're rushing to get them done. So I highly recommend doing this really all in advance and having an understanding of why and what you're doing. By doing so, it's going to be a lot smoother and a lot less stressful for you in the process. So we'll get right to it. The first thing that we're going to talk about is getting your final closing disclosures from your title company and lender. Years ago, title companies before TRID would issue HUD-1s, and that's how most closings happened. Now there's some additional documents to make sure buyers and sellers understand what they are paying for and have descriptions of what those items are. So the first thing we'll talk about is probably one of the more important things that you'll want to focus on and make sure that you have before your closing, because if you don't have it, you probably will not close on time, and that is your closing disclosure that goes to you as a buyer. This disclosure has to be made 3 days before your closing. So if you've made the mistake of scheduling your closing on Friday, which I'm just hell-bent on never doing, because if you're closing on Friday and there's any problems or hiccups, you're waiting through the whole weekend in order to go to your closing on Monday or Tuesday. And if it's a holiday, then things get really dicey really fast. So say you're scheduled closing on Thursday, you're planning out the process that you're going to take before closing. You should receive your closing disclosure 3 days before. So if you don't have your closing disclosure on Tuesday, then you're not going to close on Thursday. The same thing if you're closing on Friday and you don't have it by Wednesday, you won't close on Friday either. So if it's 4 days before and you don't have this closing disclosure, you need to be on the phone with your lender as a buyer, finding out when you're going to receive your closing disclosure. Sometimes people make mistakes, don't send them out, and if they don't get them out to you by at least 3 days before, it'll be an issue. So having said that, there are other disclosures that'll be at the closing table along with your closing disclosure. You'll also have an ALTA statement as well. The ALTA has buyer and seller columns to explain who pays for what, and they both parties have to sign off on it. It also has descriptions of the items for your closing. Any title company can show you examples of these documents in advance. So if you want to kind of get an idea of what they're going to be, what you're going to be signing before you even start the process, then you can probably do that. Back before TRID, we had HUD-1s. That was a document that was created back in 1986. That was what was used in the business when I first became an agent and used for years. You still will see them today if you're doing a transaction that's not government backed, or if it's a reverse mortgage or refinance. Lenders will still use a HUD-1 disclosure. So they don't look completely different than the disclosures we use now. They're just the ones we have now have more descriptions, and hopefully that helps buyers understand more about what it is they're paying. The disclosure timeline has been a big help, because that really was an issue back in the past. Years ago when I was an agent for the first 5 or 6 or 7 years before TRID, we had many instances that people would not get their HUD-1 till the day that they're closing. They wouldn't even know how much money they were bringing to closing at the table until just hours before they were going to close. The problem with that is you really had no time to do anything else other than decide you're going to accept what they put in front of you and sign and close and move into your house. And if you have a moving truck outside and you decided to close on Friday and it's sitting in the driveway or the parking lot of the property you're going to purchase to move in, you have to decide whether to send all that stuff back and incur all those fees, or just eat it and sign it. And so I do actually like the fact that now we have a timeline that the buyer has to be disclosed these before they go to closing. So that is actually pretty good. So that's the first part of it. Now the next part are all the small incidental things that are going to happen before you close. Hopefully your agent or you have done who have received the findings for a pest inspection if you're buying a home that is not a condo and it requires what's called a WDI, which is a wood destroying insect inspection. This is going to show if you need treatment for termites and different types of insects that could do damage to the property. So those are things that you're going to want to know in advance, obviously, because a lender requires it to have a clean report or to at least show proof that treatment has been done. Termites can do major damage to properties and make them even unsafe and unstable if they eat away at the framing of the house. So those are things that are going to be looked at by your lender, and they're going to be requirements of your closing. So a lot of times agents will wait and they will forget to order the WDI. I've had plenty of people, agents that I've worked with in the past, where I've gotten calls the day of closing or the day before closing, and they don't know what to do. They're panicked and freaked out. And most WDI companies, pest companies that we use in our market, a lot of them even have Sentry cards where they can even open up lock boxes and go inside houses without us being there, and do it legally and ethically. Getting them out there quickly is not really the issue. The issue that we would probably end up having is if you found that you need to have pest treatment done, the cost of that treatment could be very expensive. It could be as little as a few $100s. It could be as expensive as a couple thousand. It depends on what they find. If they also find additional damage, it may be something that as a buyer you're not willing to take on. If the seller's not willing to credit or make repairs and change the closing date, then those are issues. And so those are that's one of the few things we're going to talk about that's really important that you want to do. So I would say make sure when you're doing your home inspection to go ahead and have the pest company come out and do that inspection early. When I list properties, I normally go ahead and order HOA condo docs, make sure that resale packages are in, make sure we don't have violations for commonly found issues that have to do with covenants for properties. The majority of deals, I think, in our market that I've seen, people are ordering the documents after they ratify a contract. Now, our state, the HOA or condominium association, they have 14 days to provide you these documents. Now, a lot of them, they're going to provide them super quick. You're going to have them in 5 or 6 days. Well, if you pay a rush fee. But you also have others that they're going to take every day of the 14 days. And so if you're closing in 30 days and you're in the 16th, 17th day because you've been negotiating your home inspection like crazy, if you order the HOA docs, then you may not get them before you're closing. And that can be a little risky because you haven't seen the bylaws, the covenants, you don't know if you have any violations, you don't know any of those things. And if you're in a situation where the property has rotted molding and trim and needs to be painted, or you have a improvement to the property that's been made, like a deck, a patio, a fence, any of those things, and there's no approvals for them, you're going to either have to get approvals for them or tear them off. And you only hope that the past owner, the seller now, whoever put those things in, followed the rules of that HOA, because if they haven't, those items are not going to work in their current form, and you're going to either have to modify them so they pass, or you're going to have to start over, tear them all off and redo them. So it's always best when you're doing your home inspection or the WDI, request from the listing agent those resale documents. Make sure that they've ordered them, because sometimes they won't until the very end of the home inspection process. So make sure those are done. You can't make every deal super smooth because we're dealing with all kinds of different moving parts, and we're also depending upon other people in the transaction to do things and be proactive. They may not always be proactive, and those are things that can hang you up in the end. So those are things that those are two things that we can handle usually with good management, being proactive. We can handle. The next thing are more miscellaneous things that you as a buyer need to be aware of, and it's things that require you to do something. One would be making sure you have all the utility company information. I have sold lots of properties. I've probably had 100 properties that I've sold where the buyer who was buying one of my listings never set up utilities in their name, and they didn't even realize that they had to put utilities in their name and have, water and sewer and electric and gas and all those things. And they bought a home in the middle of winter and then went on holiday to go to Christmas or New Year's Eve with their family in some other state. And while they were gone, they came home and they had no power, and their home had water still in it because of the plumbing was still turned on, or the water was still on from the street, and their pipes froze and they did a ton of damage to their house. No one ever told them, hey, you need to get all these utilities turned on. And you would think people would know that, but they don't. Not everyone has owned homes before, or maybe they lived with family before and they really don't understand the whole concept of utilities and having those things turned on. So I highly recommend that you have all that organized. You get them set up to be transferred versus having them turned on, because if you have to go back and have them turned on if they've been turned off, then you have to go back to the house and turn off the main water valve, turn off the breaker panel, shut everything down. Because when the utility providers come out and turn those systems on, if there are draws on the system, they will not turn them on, they will turn them back off. And I've had a number of listings where getting things turned on in the REO foreclosure world, gosh, it would take days and days, because we'd have to meet the utility company out there to get them turned on. So just for your own sanity and time, arrange to have all those things done in advance. Make sure that they're set up to be turned on into your name on your closing date. Now, if for some reason you don't close, you need to call the utility company very quickly and make sure they don't get transferred or put in your name, because you may be paying for utilities for a company that, well, you don't own. And those are definitely not things you want to pay for if you don't own the property. The next thing would be making moving arrangements. And so if you're moving into a condominium, and a condominium has a loading dock and elevators and all these things, the condominium association or property manager is going to require, most of the time, you to pay a move-in fee. And sometimes this is in addition to an elevator fee. Sometimes the fee is not refundable, and you need to make arrangements ahead of your move, because two things will happen if you don't. You may show up with a moving truck at the loading dock and they tell you can't move in. Or you may go ahead and move in without permission and make all your neighbors hate you, because you're going to make tons of noise and none of it was arranged or scheduled. The elevator doesn't get protected and have blankets and materials hung from the ceiling to keep you from damaging the elevator. And there's nothing like damaging the property, the common area of a property you're moving into, to make all your neighbors really love you. So I would tell you in advance to arrange for all your moving. In addition to that, keys and remotes. So this is something I'm always surprised that isn't really coordinated better in the end. So houses have all kinds of fixtures in them, things that are bolted to walls that are permanent, but those are things we already kind of know to be fixtures. But a key and a remote is also considered a fixture of a property. It has been modified permanently for use in the property. Now, maybe not garage remotes technically, but for this argument, then they're fixtures. It's super difficult to close on a property, get to the property, and find out you don't have any keys. And the seller has signed and left town, and they've motored out. They're not really interested in dealing with you anymore. You want to make sure you get all the keys to the house, not just the front door key, because you really don't know if the one key operates all of the door, all the deadbolts, all the doorknobs, everything. Sometimes screen doors have different size keys. You'll make sure you have all the remotes. So those are all fixtures and have to be conveyed with the property. So what I would tell you is, when you do your walkthrough, and that's one of the things we're going to talk to at the end of this, is doing the walkthrough, which to be honest, I think I may actually do a whole entire step of a walkthrough, which I think that's what I'm going to do. But you want to make sure that those keys and remotes are in the house, or they are delivered to the closing table to make sure you have them. But that requires communication of the agents or you and the seller. Normally you're going to have an agent, so only the agents that are going to handle all that. But you want to have all those things, and you want to make sure that you have them at closing and you move into your house. So if you're scheduled on an afternoon and it's Friday and everybody's closed at 5 and you close and you don't have all these things, getting all that together and being able to move in may make things way more difficult. So make sure in advance you have all that arranged and organized. The next thing I'm going to talk about is wire fraud. So you are going to have to wire your down payment to closing most of the time. Sometimes you can do certified check or cashier's check. Most title companies prefer you to wire it. It's also usually safer if you have all the information correct. But what I will tell you is there are hackers out there and people out there that are scam artists, and that they will send you an email, your agent email, or you an email saying that here's your closing disclosure, everything's ready to go, and here is the amount you have to wire to us, and here are the wiring instructions, and for you to wire the money. Title companies will not do it that way. They will call you, they will have a conversation with you. If you receive a random email or an email asking for a wire to be sent, call your title company, call your agent. Be very, very sure before you wire anything that it is in fact going to your title company. There have been a number of people who have fallen for this, and they have wired money out of the country, and getting that money back is almost impossible. So make sure if you're going to wire money that it's legit. Don't fall for anything, because people just send you something to do it. So make sure that it all is real, and that you don't wire someone money that is really stealing it and leaving with your money. So there's all these different processes that are going to happen before you close. The next step we have is going to be step 8, and that's going to be really talking about the things to do the day before day of closing. And that's going to include your walkthrough. That'll include inspecting the property to make sure any repairs that were negotiated that are complete, and how to make sure to know they're actually completed. I'm going to have some good stories on that by things I've gone through that were a nightmare. Can't trust everybody in those transactions, and it'll be an interesting video. So we look forward to seeing you for the next video. If you like our videos, please hit the like button. If you want to see more videos, please also click subscribe at the bottom. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section, and I will also answer them as well. And we hope you're having a great week, and we'll see you soon.